Neck-throughs, guitars, they're like a guy that won't have a beer with you.
I want to hear what's pushing the notes.
Freddie King and B.B. King, Albert King, and let's not forget Burger King.
I don't want to blow my knuckle out.
Stainless steel is the work of the devil.
These go to 11.
From the East Amplification Tone Labs in Baltimore, Maryland, it's the Amps and Axes Show. With your hosts, Jeff the Godfather of Low Wattage Amps Bober and Mick Marcelino.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's
Good day
right.
to you, Mr.
Good
Bober.
day to you, Mr. Marcelino.
Oh, it's a gorgeous day.
How be ye?
We're being
big.
pretty damn good.
That's right.
And we can only thank the people that are listening right now.
That'd be our listeners.
That is you guys.
That's right.
Oh, man, you're hitting it out of the ballpark. We got the new show.
Yeah, This Week in Music.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's going gangbusters.
One day I'll put out an unedited version, and whoa, you can find out what happened.
It'll get the big hits.
Let me just tell you something. Growing up in Harford County, Maryland, not exactly the academic capital of the world.
Oh, come on, dude. It'll get the big hits, though. We'll put out eventually. We'll put out a bloopers reel of everything. Everything.
Then I'll have to leave.
Right. It'll be 6 hours long.
Exactly. So thank you so much for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for telling your buds, man, because that's the only way this thing goes. You got to tell everybody. Of course, when you go to ampsandaxescast.com.
Yes.
We got all that cool social media little tags right there.
That's right. Just click them all. Click.
And when you go to iTunes, we'll make sure you give us 5 stars.
That's right. 5
You
stars.
can hate us. Just give us 5.
I know. You know what? There ain't no hate going on.
That's right.
Sorry, there is not.
And then when you go,
sorry that weren't proper English.
Well, then maybe I should have said it. Then you go over when you're on the page. There's a little Amazon banner right underneath the title, and you click on that thing. You buy whatever you're going to buy, and guess what? Mm-hmm. They they give us a little kickback, and you don't pay anything extra.
That's right, and bookmark it so you can do it over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely, right.
So then it's a Halloween. Somebody needs a costume.
Yeah.
Or
a scary face.
Horseless headsman.
Have you seen the scary face?
No.
Holy crap. It looks like a human's head, and it sits on the outside of the window so you can scare people inside of your house.
Oh, wow.
Or other houses. And some of them actually tap on the glass. Some of them have sensors that the eyes follow you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Creepy stuff. They had to actually take it down, I forget, Canada.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they couldn't take it. A little scary up there. So, anyway, speaking of Canada, underneath of our episode is our good buddy.
I was going to say underneath our episode is Canada, but that can't be because that's Mexico. Canada's up top.
Yes, but underneath the episode on our page.
That's it. That would be Jason Seditas.
That's right, and he gives us...
Quick lick.
There you go. And boy, are they. He's really tearing it up, man.
You would swear, English please, you would swear that he speeds that thing up.
No.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
I would believe that, but no, he's not doing
it's
that.
It's not, no.
No, and man, I don't know where...
right.
His brain has got to have some spots in it that he's like, oh, I forgot to take out the garbage again. Because I don't hear anything ever repeat.
Right.
That's kind of crazy.
And, he does so much musically, how could you be thinking about taking out the trash anyway? Brain's not big enough. At least mine's not.
Exactly.
So, good on you, Jason.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So guess what?
I hazard too.
There's a guy out there, a couple people know him, Joe Bonamassa.
Joe B.
We got to have him on a show one day. It's he's got like 1,000 guitars now. It's kind of tough to get a hold of him. But anyway,
it's true.
If he's listening, or if anybody knows of him, tap him on the shoulder, say, "Hey, go on Amps."
And he does his own podcast thing, and
but it's kind of there, and it's not. It's,
he was. I think he was big into it a while back because he took me on the bus and this is where I do the podcast.
Yeah. And he had a guy that was helping him. It was like a radio guy or something.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, he's got this new line of Epiphone guitars. They're like Firebird 1s.
Nice.
Yeah, they got the single pickup, 1 volume, 1 tone. You know, and it's basically built like an original Firebird. It's got cloisons with the banjo tuners. You know, they kind of stick out the back per se. And if you go onto Gibson's website, you can actually see the guitars, and then there's a video of Joe playing them. And he says, here's all the originals. And he A-B's them, and he said, some of these Epiphones sound better than the originals. And they are quite inexpensive compared to the originals.
I think it's pretty cool that they actually, what I think is going the extra mile of putting banjo tuners on them. I mean, they really, I was going to say it's an Epiphone, so you could have just put regular tuners on it.
It's not the case anymore
with
them.
It's really not.
We were having this discussion. I mean, like your Gary Clark Jr., that, it's got a really nice set of pickups in it. And, the long tenon.
You were telling me about the tenon. I didn't know about that.
The tenon thing is so weird because, studios and standards and I don't know if traditional has them or not, but the tenon on a Les Paul, on the American version,
on a Gibson
Les Paul is it's short.
Yeah,
it stops before it even gets to the cavity. It stops like right at the cavity, right, which would take it to the end of the fingerboard. Okay. But on the Epiphones, they all extend, and that's the higher dollar,
form of making
form
a
of
guitar.
the Gibsons.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Well, no, a form of the Gibsons, but these are not expensive guitars. They're fairly priced, and they're running Burstbucker pickups in them. Some of them have Tone Pros bridges. And they've got, locking gears on some of them. They've got the higher end nuts, and the crazy part, a lot of them have ebony fingerboards, which you don't get on any of the American versions.
It's true.
So it's
the Iomi, right?
Yeah,
Is that the Epiphone thing?
Yeah, that was the Epiphone, and that thing has his signature pickups, and the ebony fingerboard, and the extended tenon, which and they extend the fingerboard, so they instead of at 22 frets, it's 24 frets, so you don't have that little plastic piece between the pickup and the neck.
Right, the fretboard goes right up to the pickup.
Right up to the pickup, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they actually put the strap lock or the strap pin on the bout, on the top horn of that guitar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it balances right. Yeah, SGs want to go a little neck heavy because of where the pin is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got to have a suede strap like I do that grabs onto your shirt.
Right.
And just flips you.
Right.
No,
your shirt and you.
Yeah. So
that's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
To switch gears and go in some comedy here, and I'm going to try this. If it fails, I'll recover. But Joe Walsh went on Conan the other night.
Okay.
And only in Joe Walsh fashion could he ever tell a story like this about trashing the penthouse of a hotel. And I'll leave it at that, and we'll play the audio. But you're going to like this one.
So Joe Walsh trashed. Was it with the Eagles?
This was back in the day. Joe used to have, the lifestyle.
Yes,
very heavily. Yes. I'm sure Joe has the residuals of that when he talks. You would think he's drunk. But that's kind of
Maserati did 185
exactly,
etc. Yeah.
So let's take a listen here, and this is only 2 minutes 34, but it's good. And then we'll come out. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
All right. So here we go.
You had back in the day quite a reputation for trashing hotel rooms, and it got to the point where I would imagine it would be hard for you to have been able to stay in a hotel. When they saw you come and you said, "Hey, Joe Walsh, I want to check in," why would they let you stay there?
Well, maybe a $10,000 security deposit.
You would seriously leave a $10,000 security deposit?
Well, I'm exaggerating, but they needed some kind of assurance.
Yeah.
See, my job really when I checked out was to get across the state line before the maids saw the room.
What's the most damage you ever did to a hotel room? What's the most it cost you?
$23,000. Well, I have a disclaimer.
Okay.
John Belushi was a really good friend of mine. And when he came over, pretty much you just canceled all your plans for the next 24 hours.
Right.
And he came over to my hotel room.
And what happened?
And we stayed up for a couple weeks that night. And
I love that line. And what did you do to the room?
We had
like a police officer getting the details afterwards.
I know. I'm trying to think what cost that much at a hotel.
Am I a guest or is this a deposition?
Yeah. We'll tell you afterwards.
Okay.
All right. So what did you do to a room that cost that much money?
Well, we had access to the penthouse suite, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't know it was the owner of the hotel's private apartment. But there was really nice artwork, so we didn't want to mess with that. But we didn't like the wallpaper. So we took the paintings down and tore all the wallpaper off and put the paintings back on. You can see where the plaster guy wrote, 5 3/4 inches.
Right.
Much better.
Yeah. So you made it better. You should have given him a bill. You made his place better.
Unfortunately, it didn't work that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So amongst his career as a guitar player, he's also an interior decorator.
Exactly. 23 grand. Now that Belushi was alive.
Yeah.
So that was a ton of money at that time, man.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? We were up for a week that night.
Just think how much else the night cost them.
Oh my God. Whew. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. How about that?
Life's been good.
The funny thing is that those days, I hear about it every now and then. One of these metal bands comes rolling into town and it's like mayhem. But in today's standard, with everybody having cameras literally at the end of their arm,
right?
That kind of stuff doesn't go on as much as probably as it used to back in the day.
Absolutely, not as much.
The Who was notorious. They would throw TVs out of the window from 20 stories up.
Right.
That could kill somebody. Those were huge, giant CRTs, not these flat, wafer-thin, these things weighed like 90 pounds.
You throw a flat screen out, it could still kill somebody.
Yeah, it'll slice them. It'll cut them in half. But, a TV would crush you,
Yeah.
It's just craziness. But, old Joe Walsh, huh?
Yeah.
That's stories. Somebody that I think we probably can obtain, and I'll have to look into it. But he would probably be an awesome interview. If we could,
I tell you, I know the last show was great.
Yeah, and that is a guy
short but great.
That is a very underrated guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
He everybody likes him because he's got the certain songs. Life's Been Good and Rocky Mountain Way, stuff like that. But if you ever watch that guy, he's amazing with what he can pull off, and you just have it's like. I had no idea that the guy could,
Well, I know in Rocky Mountain Way, he plays two guitars.
Yeah.
Not at once.
Yes.
But he plays two guitars.
Yeah, he has one set up for slide and the other one is standard. Yeah.
Yep.
So, good stuff there. So we have a reoccurring guest, man.
We do.
And it's on short notice because we've gotten some responses and people have made some requests. So we thought, hey, if he's available, we'll ask him.
We'll bring him back in.
And sure enough, he is.
Yeah, totally. So, whether we continue where we left off or whether we go into a more gear-oriented segment, and I know there's a lot to talk about there, and there's touring that I don't think we covered a lot of in the last episode. So, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with our guest of the week, our recurring guest and guest of the week, reggae great, Mr. Andy Bassford.
Hey everybody, Ryan Roxy, guitarist for Alice Cooper Band, and you are listening to Amps and Axes. Enjoy the ride.
Okay, so we are back as promised with our recurring guest of the week, the reggae man himself, Mr. Andy Bassford. Andy, hello, and thanks for being back on with us.
Okay, I'm happy that you can have me back to finish the story. I'll try to move more quickly than in part one.
Part one was great, man. There was a lot of there was a lot of stories, and there was a lot of information and education. So it might have gone long, but it was very cool. So, I think we left off around 1980 somewhere, where your recording situation was like the Rosetta Stone with Guns and Weed. So it was kind of a good place to leave off, but we could also pick up there.
Right. Okay. So the situation when I went to Jamaica, well, I had acquired, believe it or not, in my travels, an original 1968 Paisley Telecaster.
Oh,
wow!
That someone had glued a Guild humbucking pickup about a third of the way between the bridge pickup and the neck pickup, leaning toward the neck pickup side, and it had a 5-way switch. And it was one of the best sounding guitars I ever heard in my life. However, the neck warped, and I didn't know anything about replacement parts.
Wow.
Oh.
So when I went to Jamaica, I sold it to somebody in the Hartford area who shall remain nameless, and he gave me next to nothing of what it was worth, but I didn't know any better. And I'm sure he did very well on the deal. But the idea of having a humbucking pickup and a Telecaster really stayed with me. I also sold an original Silvertone, the black one with 2 pickups. And I had been using a Fender Super Twin. I don't know if we talked about that in the previous episode, but that was my 70s bar band amp. It was loud.
Oh, yeah.
It was heavy and loud. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Absolutely.
But it had the 5-band, supposedly parametric EQ on it, I think.
Yeah, it was.
It was even louder than the standard Twin. I mean, and I was playing my Gibson 68 Gibson SG, which I still have, and which has gone through an incredible number of changes. And the first change that I did with it was when DiMarzio's came out in the mid '70s was when they showed up on the Connecticut bar scene, and in those days loud was good, so I thought, wow, they'll be louder. I'll get them. So I bought one of them. I put it in the SG, probably in the neck position, because I used to prefer the neck position to the bridge or the middle. I don't know why, but that's the way I heard things at that time. And I put the DiMarzio in one of the... I had enough money for one, so I got one. And I put it in one of the positions, and it was so much louder than the stock pickup that I immediately went out the next week after I got paid for my gigs and bought another one. And it seemed to work well with the Twin. I have a tape somewhere of what that sounded like, but I couldn't access it within 2 hours. My life depended on it, but I know it's here. I mean,
to me, that's almost counterintuitive, because DiMarzio's, they were built to be dirty, and at least most of them that I had experience with.
The first ones.
Yeah.
Yes, and I got one of the very early ones.
Yeah, because their first pickup was the Super Distortion.
Exactly.
Right, and that's what I had.
Yeah, and they overwound the crap out of it to drive the front end.
Right, they were meant to be dirty, and they were, because they were so overwound, they were kind of darker, and that to me just seems completely opposite of what you would like, if you're looking for a spanky kind of reggae.
Well, I wasn't really then. I was in a rock band, and we were playing covers. This is like before I went to Jamaica.
Okay.
It's relevant because it's the guitar I went to Jamaica with, and it had these DiMarzios in it. And it also had a preamp circuit that I put in. It was a Guitar Player article, and it involved, in the late 70s, I remember reading an interview with Jay Giles where he said he had put something like it in one of his guitars, and I guess there were letters about it. And Guitar Player published an article with the circuit in it, and I was into that Craig Anderton Electronics for Musicians book. So I figured I could put this thing together, and sure enough, I was able to build one, and I installed it in the guitar it had a 9-volt battery, so I sort of routed out part of the body to get the 9-volt battery in.
Of course.
It's just awful.
Wow.
My father had chisels, and I had no fear.
Yeah, come on, fess up. There wasn't routing. There was chiseling.
Exactly. It wasn't routing. It was definitely chiseling. And then right before I went to Jamaica, I was really into the Blues Breakers record, and I called up Seymour Duncan, and I said, I'm looking to get this sound, and they asked what kind of guitar you have and what kind of amp and so on, and I told them, and they said, well, you should, what you want is a P90. Now, I didn't even know what a P90 was, but I sent away the money for it, and they sent me the P90, and I got the chisel out again and put it in between the two other pickups, and made a little toggle switch so I could switch it in and out with any of the pickup combinations. Mm-hmm. And the preamp had a distortion, like a gain, a master treble, but an active treble and an active bass control, and it had a volume. So this is what I went to Jamaica with, which is completely the wrong sort of thing to go play reggae with. And after about 2 months of actually recording, there was one tune that actually became the first big song I played on. It's called Gunman by Michael Prophet. I'm playing rhythm on it instead of lead. And you can hear how inadequate this sound was to play lead. It didn't stop the record being a hit. When I had to play rhythm in the studio, I realized that this setup was not really happening for the kind of work I was doing. So I started thinking about other guitars and other things to do. Mm-hmm. I came back to America for Christmas in 1980, having been asked to join We the People, which was the best band in Jamaica at the time. And We the People was sort of like the house band for the music industry in Jamaica. Most of the artists didn't have their own bands. So if there was a stage show, the promoter would hire We the People and anywhere from 6 to 10 to 15 singers, vocal groups, and DJs, depending on who was hot at the time. And we would back all of them.
Wow.
And so when I went home for Christmas, I got a tour with Culture. I don't know if I told that story last time or not.
A tour with who?
Ritz. I can't remember.
You were touring with who?
Culture.
Oh,
it was
okay.
a very popular 70s group. They had a big tune called 2 Sevens Clash, and a lot of the punk and new wave people were very into them.
Oh, cool.
And the quick version of the story, there's a longer version on my website, but the quick version of the story is a friend of mine and I went to see them with a couple of dates, and we were supposed to my friend wanted me to get a table, and I was too embarrassed to ask, but he kind of shamed me into doing it. They saw me there, they grabbed me and pulled me into the dressing room and gave me a spare guitar, and the next time my date saw me, I was on stage at the Ritz.
Wow.
Hey, it's that dude.
and
wasn't that guy just sitting here?
Right, and nothing happened. I mean, that didn't work.
Well, then it just wasn't going to work, period.
No, it wasn't meant to be.
That's right.
But I ended up doing the tour with them, and I had previously bought a 64 Stratocaster, which is still one of my main guitars.
Oh, nice.
From my roommate and Bill Flowery, who's now a songwriter in Nashville, and he recurs often in this story because he used to buy gear from me when I needed money, and then he would sell it back to me when I had money. A real friend. Everybody who likes gear should know somebody like this.
For sure.
Anyway, Bill wanted to buy a custom-made guitar, so he had sold me the Strat for $375 in 1977 or 78, wow. With the stipulation that if I ever wanted to sell it, I had to sell it back to him for $375. I said to him, "That's not going to happen. I'm not worried about it. I just love the guitar." Mm-hmm. I didn't go to Jamaica with it because I'm not sure. I think I felt more comfortable with the SG. I didn't use the Stratocaster live much. I just had it at home and played it and loved it. So anyway, when the Culture Tour thing happened at the end of 1980, beginning of 1981, I used the Stratocaster Telecaster because it was I wanted to start breaking it in and getting used to it, and I thought it would be a good guitar to go back to Jamaica with, given what I was facing in the studios.
Mm-hmm.
And the guitar performed beautifully, and the tour went very well. And then I went back to Jamaica in early January and joined We the People and started working with them.
And was Culture based in Jamaica as well?
Yes. So all these groups then were based in Jamaica. A lot of people have since emigrated, but in the early 80s, pretty much all the people that were a big deal were still in Jamaica. So anyway, it's early 1981 now. I've done my first little tour, and I'm playing with We the People doing these massive stage shows, and we would get one rehearsal to learn the songs for all 10 or 12 or however many groups they were.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a fascinating, it was just a complete exercise in crash course retaining, and there was not time to write charts. There wasn't time to take notes. You could basically write the song down with the key and maybe a couple of chords or something about the bridge. And you had the one rehearsal, and then the next day was the show. Wow. And we didn't, record things. We didn't have all these wonderful devices to record rehearsals like we do now. Mm-hmm. So you really had to retain, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Just like in the studio. In the studio, we would cut tracks in 20 minutes. If you didn't have a part, it wasn't on the tape.
Right.
And the live rehearsals were the same sort of thing. These guys would listen to a song once and play it back.
Yeah, that's
the keyboard player had perfect pitch, and the bass player had a great facility for recalling lines. And in many cases, the horn players, who were the top session guys, had actually played on the record in question. So it didn't take any of these guys long to do it to
Mm-hmm.
play what they needed to play. I was the odd man out, so I had to catch up. And unbeknownst to me, one of the records I played on back in 1980, a Dennis Brown album called Foul Play, became his first album for A&M Records. So We the People was also Dennis Brown's band of choice, and Dennis was the biggest thing in reggae at that time. If you know reggae, you know a lot about Dennis Brown. If you're not a big reggae person, you may not have heard of him. But he was Bob Marley's favorite reggae singer. And
nice.
His nickname was the Crown Prince, and the implication being that he was the next in line after Marley.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I hadn't met Dennis, but I'd played on the last two tracks of what became his first album for A&M. He was signed to a Jamaican record label / studio called Joe Gibbs, where I worked a lot. And that was kind of how I got to join We the People. The guys in the band saw me doing sessions at Joe Gibbs. The lead singer actually worked as an engineer there, a guy named Ruddy Thomas, who was a very fine singer, had his own solo career. He was in the band, and he did engineering. So he kept busy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I met Lloyd Parks, the leader, through Joe Gibbs as well. He was kind of their house bass player. And Dennis was signed to them, so Joe Gibbs made the deal with A&M through a guy who had been with Motown named Larry Maxwell. And I joined the band in January, and by June of the same year, we were on the road touring behind the first album. And, so I went from playing in in a country western bar band in Connecticut. That was a Strat gig, by the way. That was I used the Strat on that, but that was the last thing I did before I emigrated to Jamaica.
Wow!
And I went from that to doing these sessions, to joining the top band in the country, to doing a tour for an artist signed to a major label within a year. It was pretty meteoric.
Now, I have to ask you about the recording situation. Did you use the same gear that you toured with, or was the recording situation more like, okay, maybe you bring your own guitar, but there's certain gear in there that they get a signature type of tone from, and you're kind of expected to, plug and play into that, or was everything just everybody's own gear, and it got a similar sound? I don't know.
Excellent question. Excuse me. The situation was that the industry depended on really quick turnaround times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the profit margin in reggae was never huge, and the biggest cost, believe it or not, was recording tape, because it was unavailable in Jamaica. It had to be imported, and it was taxed at the airport.
Yeah.
So, and the recording time for, say, 16-track tape recording was much more expensive than 4-track, which is what a lot of the people used because it was cheaper. So, in order to maximize the use of studio time, all the studios had house kits, house organs and pianos, and house amps.
Mm-hmm.
And you could bring your own amp in. They didn't object to that, but you weren't expected to. And in fact, a lot of the session players didn't even own amplifiers. What they did was, if they went on tour, whoever they were touring for, the booking agency or the record company or the management would get amps for them. And at that point, the standard reggae touring amp, which is a great sound, was the Silverface Twin with JBLs. A lot of people used those.
I can see that. I can see that. You know,
Yeah,
certainly wouldn't be my favorite rock amp, but I can absolutely see it for reggae.
For reggae, it was great. And the problem with that was the JBLs were so heavy, sometimes the cabinet would break while you were carrying it. I've seen that happen several times.
I've seen the baffle come right out.
This was the part. It's not the baffle. It's the side where it joins the top. Like I've actually seen
joints.
that come off. You know, just like you're carrying a suitcase and the suitcase falls off.
Well, there you go.
Right. Yeah.
So that was pretty much the standard touring thing. The Wailers used Marshalls sometimes. I don't remember if it was Al or Junior who liked Marshalls, but they used Marshalls. Family Man used the Acoustic 360. Most of the other guys liked SVTs. Live-wise, live in Jamaica, it was whatever you had. The equipment with We the People, where I joined them, was the Bo P, the other guitar player, had a Vibrolux. I had a Music Man 11250, which is like 60 watts, 112.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Vox Continental organ, a Fender Rhodes where probably a quarter of the keys didn't work, and a Leslie for the keyboard player. And the PA was the Shure Vocal Master, and that was it.
Perfect.
But most of our gigs were large shows outdoors, and there was a wonderful sound company called Audiophone that did all the big shows. And one of the great things about Audiophone was they knew us inside out, and we knew them. It was almost like we had our own PA company.
Right.
And they dialed us in quickly. They knew what reggae was supposed to sound like. The shows always sounded amazing. And, you know, the fact that we had these 40 and 60 watt amps wasn't a big deal. Oh, I forgot to mention Lloyd had the SVT to give you an idea. You know,
well, it's all about the bottom end.
The guitar amps total 100 watts between them, and the bass amp is 300, and that's kind of indicative of the way of thinking at the time.
Well, you always need more power on the bottom end.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you absolutely do.
Yeah.
You know?
My bass player had the 1600 watt SVT 4 Pro, and he used to bridge that thing.
Oh, for God's sake.
And then he ran it through the A10. Well, we used to rehearse in a warehouse, and it was huge. For 6 years, I didn't know if my drummer, if he had a bass drum pedal. Couldn't even hear it.
You could see the foot moving, but you weren't sure if he was faking.
One day he actually punched through the head. And I was like, oh my God. And he went, I've been trying to hear myself for 6 years.
Your bass drum needs an amp.
Right.
You do need to push that much. I mean, when you have the bass has to, it has to really move a lot more to get to you.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
reggae is kind of a bottom end feel kind of thing too.
Yeah.
It's awesome to
get that. If you have a reggae band and the only person who shows up is the bass player and a singer, you still have a gig.
You still got a reggae band.
And Ray Charles with the Fender Rhodes with the keys that are stuck. Son, there's nothing wrong with this piano.
Well, our keyboard player was a young genius named Bubbler. His real name is Franklin Wall. Waul. He still plays with Sly and Robbie. If you go see Sly and Robbie, he's generally a keyboard player. And he was ambidextrous, he had perfect pitch, and he could play everything on a record and go around the back and master the acetate. I mean, he was and he was invaluable. He had perfect pitch, total recall. He'd hear any kind of tune once and tell you what the chords were. And he had a wonderful ability to get the most out of gear. One night we had Robbie Lynn come and substitute for him because somebody in his family had died. And Robbie sat down behind the piano and played 3 chords and said, "How does Bubbler make this work?" He said, what's the problem? And he says, "All these keys don't work." And we said, "Bubbler never complained about it." We never heard that they didn't work.
He's fabricated these fabulous inversions, and you can't tell that their keys missing.
He was something else. There's a live show we did. You can find it online in Toronto in 1981 at Varsity Stadium. We were opening for Third World at that point on the tour, and Bubbler's the only keyboard player. And if you listen to it, you'd swear there's at least 2. I send that to keyboard players all the time who want to hear what you can do in a reggae band with one keyboard player. It's really like a textbook.
Wow.
So he was a huge asset. And okay, so getting back to the studios, the bass was always taken direct.
Okay.
They usually had something like a bassman in the studio so you could hear things and work while you're working out the tunes, but they never used that sound.
Mm-hmm.
The guitar amps at Channel 1, there was a twin and I think a bandmaster. And Tough Gong had twin reverbs. Dynamic had a twin reverb and some kind of Yamaha amp that didn't sound very good. Let me think. Aquarius had twins. Harry J had twins. Most of them were twins. Joe Gibbs had twins. And you would basically we played at very low volumes in the studio, and I tell people this all the time and they're incredulous, but those records were recorded at volumes you could talk over in the studio.
Wow.
The amps were behind baffles, but even so we never ran them over 2 or 3, maybe 4 or something. There's a very funny story. The week before my first session at Channel 1, The Clash came down to Jamaica to record. They were very into reggae. And they were working with this guy, Mikey Dredd, who was a radio DJ and also a DJ rapper type guy. And he had brought them to Channel 1 because they loved the records that were done there so much. And they were trying to get that bottom end and that kind of sensibility in their sound. And the story I heard was that Mick Jones came in there and saw the twin reverb and put it on its legs and turned everything up to 10 and started being Mick Jones. And the engineer came screaming out of the booth and ran over to him and turned him down and cursed him out. Blow it up.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's a one amp that we have to use for everybody. You can't blow it up.
This amp has to last for the next 30 years. You can't do that.
That's right.
We may never get tubes for this.
What's
that's another thing.
At a point, almost.
Oh my God! The technical end of this, these things were only serviced when they stopped working.
Oh my Lord!
I would imagine.
But the amps in the studio weren't moved at all, and they weren't cranked, so the wear wasn't the same as it would be if you were, hauling it in the van and playing in a different room every night for 6 months. But the things were never serviced. And prices for spare parts in Jamaica were just ridiculous. I remember that my Music Man broke down at one point, and I took it to Morris, who is a great engineer at Harry J. Most of these guys came out of an electronics background. They had fixed TVs or built hi-fis or had some kind of, serious electronic training before they went into music. So I took it to Morris. He said, I can fix this. I just can't get the part. And I said, what do you need? He said, it's a 741 op amp.
Okay. And you couldn't get it there. Wow.
Next time we went to Miami, I went to Radio Shack. They were 79 cents.
Right.
I went to Jamaica. I went around looking in Jamaica just for fun. Afterwards, they were $10.
Wow.
That was with the markup on a 79-cent op amp.
Wow.
And the 741 is like the most garden variety op amp imaginable.
For sure.
It's just...
It's very early in audio op amps.
Yeah.
Right, and nothing dramatic about it. It's got the pins, it's got the ground pin, it's got the gain things, and there's no bells and whistles whatsoever.
Right.
So if Radio Shack was selling it for 79 cents, it was probably costing them 20. Mm-hmm. Probably costing $5 to manufacture.
Right. And it was $10 in Jamaica.
$10 in Jamaica, right.
So did you bring back a suitcase full and make a fortune?
I thought of it, but I had this sort of ethical thing about that stuff because we toured a lot, and in Jamaica at that time, touring was really a privilege. It was very hard for people to get visas to go out, and you couldn't take Jamaican money out. Huh. You couldn't change it.
Okay.
There was only a limited amount you could change. So U.S. dollars and anything that came from the U.S. or England was extremely valuable. Mm-hmm. And I was actually approached by one of the music stores the people I didn't like very much. And they said, you play with We the People, you could bring in guitars and we could sell them. And I thought, for 10 times what they're worth, I'm not going to be involved in that. I'm not going to do that.
How noble.
Well, I don't know if I'd feel that way now, but back then I was, I didn't want to contribute to the economic exploitation of people who wanted to play music.
Right, sure.
It was just so hard to get instruments there. It was brutal. And, people had, a lot of the stuff had intonation problems, bowed necks. Kingston is a very wet city. It's very hot. It's very humid. And I had a screwdriver and pliers and a soldering gun, and I was the guitar tech. I fixed everybody's stuff.
You're totally qualified.
I knew more about it than they did.
There you go.
One of my favorite sayings is, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, and that was definitely true with me in guitar repair in Jamaica.
Well, there you go. Helping your brothers out.
Okay, so back to the studio thing. People generally showed up and plugged into what was there. That was the quickest thing to do, and everybody worked in the same studios, and everybody knew what the amps did, and people showed up with the same guitars all the time. One of the things I started doing was bringing effects, because I figured I had an affinity for them, and I figured that might set me apart from some of the other guys a little bit. And being an outsider, I needed something, an additional reason for them to want to use me. Mm-hmm. And I went down there with a compressor, MXR compressor, the red one, a distortion one, Super Distortion Plus, an MXR flanger, and a small stone on a pedal board, and a wah. And I used those for a while. And then the first tour with Dennis Brown was in June of 1981. And we were making $400 a week. I thought it was all the money in the world. I couldn't believe it. So the other thing that happened on that tour was I got exposed to Mesa Boogie. And the way that worked was, it was a record company promotional tour, and record company in those days would get you anything you wanted and bill it back to the artist, and, set it against his royalties. They didn't care.
Right.
So what they did was, we got to L.A. and the road manager that was assigned to us by the record company came to me and said, what kind of amp do you want for the tour? And I said, well, what can I get? And they said, we're renting from SIR. You can get anything you want. And I said, do they have Mesa Boogie? In 1981, this was like, you didn't see a lot of these things, and I had read about them, and they sounded fantastic, So
were they the wicker basket models?
The cane, the cane.
Yes, this was a wicker basket one, and it had the graphic EQ and the 160-watt switch.
2C? Was it a 2 or
no? It was. I don't know. It might have been. I don't remember the model number, but I do remember the wicker basket, and they took it out of the road case, and I thought, oh my God.
Yeah, if it had the original ones that didn't have EQ, I think maybe
that was a 1.
Yeah,
right?
The 2s I think maybe started with EQ, and I don't even know
think
if
it was a 2.
Yeah,
it wasn't. No, it wasn't a 1. It was definitely a 2.
Yeah,
90 watts or 60 watts, right?
No, I think it was 100.
100.
Were they 100?
160. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's configured.
And a magnet that. I sold.
Most of them came with EVs.
Yeah, I sold a pedal to a guy one time, right? And I lived like on the 3rd floor of this apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Can I bring my amp over and just test it out?" I said, "Well, what do you have?" And he goes,
"See where this is going."
He goes, "I just have this little combo." And I went, "Oh, okay, no problem, right?" Mm-hmm. So he comes over and he's got this 2C, and he set it down on the floor. And I said, I'll move it over here." And I went to go grab it, and I was like, "What the hell's in the bottom of this thing? Would you line it with lead?" And he goes, "No, why?" And I'm like, "This thing was like 60 pounds or something. It was ridiculous."
At least, yeah. At least.
And it was this little box, you know, and I just remember it was loud.
Yeah.
Had a lot of volume to it.
Yeah. That's what they were known for.
Well, so anyway, they ordered this thing and they charged it to Dennis's account, I guess, the tour account. And I was in heaven. You know, the clean sound, first of all, was actually serviced, so it was so much better than stuff I've been playing through. And second of all, I really liked the clean sound on a boogie, and I like the overdrive sound, but I had never worked with an amp with 2 gain stages, so it took a good month on the road to sort out what the best combo was, given that I had this SG with the distortion, the super distortions, and the preamp in it, and the foot switch, and you know that the sound man was always saying I was too loud, and he was right, and yet the tone was so intoxicating, you know, you didn't really want to turn down, you know, as many guitar players have discovered before and since. Anyway, about halfway through the tour, I got it sorted, and there's a live tape from Chicago where it really, really sounds good. And
were you doing mostly rhythms with it, or
no?
Were you doing
with
solos
Dennis,
at that
I was
point?
the lead player.
Oh, okay.
And I was kind of looking to make my mark, and I had evolved this sort of approach where I played the parts that were on the records, and in the spaces, of which there are many in the reggae songs, I would play these fills, and I would jump back and forth between what I was supposed to play and what I felt like throwing in. And it would never occur to me to do this now, and it was kind of over the top. But when I listened to the live tapes, I realized that it really, really did work, and if it hadn't worked, they would have stomped all over me. And I was trying to figure out ways to balance the picking level, which a lot of times involves muting with your right hand, with the more rock style, you know, phrasing I was doing in between. So I was trying to sort a bunch of things out all at once. I was trying to sort out being on the road for the first time, and I was trying to sort out, you know, human being stuff and relationship stuff and changing time zones and riding on a bus and all these kinds of things, and actually making money and, you know, being in the, you know, the big time, for lack of a better word, or at least the first rung of it. And then all these technical things like how to get the sound on stage that I heard in my head that would also work with the band. So I was trying to solve a lot of stuff. By the end of the tour, I really had a fairly good handle on the music. And when we got to the end of the tour, we went to New York, and I went to Manny's, which was the big store at the time. And I walked in there, you know, with my Dennis Brown tour T-shirt on and stuff, feeling like $1 million. And I said I'd like to buy some effects pedals, and they said, "You can't try them out. We'll demonstrate them for you." And I went, "Oh,
wow!
You've got to be kidding! Like I'm a dude now. You can't talk to me like this."
I know what I'm doing.
I didn't say that, you know, but that was what I was thinking.
Wow!
So I said, "All right, I want to hear the Ibanez delay, and I want to hear the Ibanez chorus," because I didn't have a chorus pedal. And these were those wonderful Ibanez things that required 2 9-volt batteries.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
They sounded great. Unfortunately, I don't have either of them. They vanished along the way, but they were wonderful sounding, and you could get that spaceship regeneration with the echo unit. You turn up the regeneration all the way, and it starts self-oscillating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the Jamaicans love that. I'd kick that in. I kept these things on top of my amp rather than on the ground, so I could play with the knobs.
Nice.
And I would play, and I'd hit the delay thing and crank the regeneration up and slow it down, or sound like a spaceship, landing and stuff.
Oh yeah,
great.
you could cook a speaker with one of those. And
you probably could. I never did.
Once you start getting them going, when you drop that thing down, that because it goes from this really quick buzz, because it's all analog,
right,
down to this thing that used to it's like gung gung gung, and I mean it just hammers the speaker.
It
and
really
if you got
does.
it cranked, you could really you
put a hurting on it.
Oh yeah, or the audience.
Well,
all of the above. Anyway, it was a great thing for somebody young and full of hormones to have access to. So
totally.
Anyway, I bought the things because they did sound great, and I said to myself, I'm never going into Manny's music again. Never, ever, 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 ever.
How dare they disrespect you like that?
About 10 years. I was so mad at them. So I got back to Jamaica, and I had this tour money burning a hole in my pocket. And there was a 335 that was the studio guitar at Joe Gibbs. And it was a 67 or 68. I've looked up the serial number, and I'm not sure. They can't tell me which one it is. I think it's a 67 from some other things. And this guitar had been in a fire, and the finish was ruined.
Oh, wow.
And it belonged to Ruddy Thomas, the engineer. And he'd bought it from the guy, another great guitar player and bass player named Ranchi McLean, who's one of the unsung heroes of Jamaican music. And anyway, Ranchi had owned this guitar. It was in the fire. He sold it to Ruddy, and Ruddy tried to refinish it by hand. He was trying to take the finish off with sandpaper, and he gave up about 2/3 of the way through. And it looked just, it looked weird and awful, but it sounded and played great.
Yeah, it didn't have much finish left on it, so it was probably very resonant.
Yeah, I still have it. It's really one of my favorite guitars.
Nice.
And so anyway, I bought it from him for $400, and now I had 3 guitars to do sessions with. I had the Strat, I had the SG, and I had the 335. So I would kind of rotate back and forth between them, and then I soon discovered that some of the guitars liked some of the amps better than others. So depending on which studio I was going to, I would bring one of the 3. At Harry J, the twins seemed to like the 335. So that was what I would bring if I was going to Harry J. Tough Gong. Tough Gong was the best maintained studio. They had a guy there named Chow who had been an assistant engineer at the Basing Street studio that Island had in the late 60s, where they did all those things like Traffic and Free and Spooky Tooth and all that stuff.
Wow.
So Chow had been around during all that stuff. There was a really creative time, probably 68, 72 in England with hard rock, and a lot of those guys were people I'd listened to, and Chow had actually worked with them. He was this very tall Chinese guy. He seemed like 9 feet tall at the time. I don't think he's that tall, but and he had kind of a funny Chinese/Jamaican/English accent, and he was the guy who fixed everything pretty much on the island. He was really good.
Nice.
And
Chinese, English, Jamaican accent. That's pretty crazy.
I'm sorry?
Chinese, Jamaican, English accent.
Well, there's a lot of Jamaicans of Chinese or partial Chinese descent in the music. The Chung brothers are probably the most visible example, Mikey and Jeffrey Chung. But a lot of the people in Jamaica have some Chinese ancestry. Robbie Shakespeare, believe it or not, is one of them. If you look carefully at his eyes, you can see it. And there's also a strong Indian, East Indian strain in Jamaica. Sly Dunbar is part Indian. And it goes all through the music, and a lot of people are various combinations of these ethnic groups. So it's not unusual to see Chinese-looking people in Jamaica at all.
Interesting.
And at one point, Chow, I was doing some kind of bluesy overdub, and Chow said something to the effect, last time I heard anybody play like that was Paul Kossoff, and I felt real good.
Whoa.
Oh, there you go.
Felt okay. Thank you. I'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So,
wow.
So I had my little pedal board and my chorus and my delay, and I didn't use the delay in the studio because the engineers like to put that on after the fact. But I did shuffling all these effects around, and I lent out the distortion and the compressor and never got them back. That's another story. But
wow.
So I was running around.
Somebody else was now trying to cop your originality, and your sound.
Well, I hear now from people, like I meet younger musicians from Jamaica when they come up, and obviously, I haven't been there for 30-something years, but they come up and say that they've heard of me. So I guess I made some sort of impact, and
I'm sure.
And some of the younger guitar players mentioned going to see me play. And We the People was a very busy band, and there were guitar players in Jamaica who were playing this way. Al Anderson and Donald Kinsey and Junior Marvin, all of whom played with Bob, and Cat Coor from Third World, all had varying takes on the rock approach. Junior had actually been in a band on Island called Hanson, and Donald had been in another band on Island whose name escapes me, like a blues rock trio, which is how they got hooked up with Bob. But these guys didn't play live in Jamaica. Third World was too big to play live in Jamaica. They played in Jamaica maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
Wow.
And We the People played all the time. So these younger guitar players, I was the guy who could play like that they could actually access. That they could, because we really, the band was aptly named. We really were the people's band. We played everywhere, regardless of, Jamaica's very politicized. The two parties shoot at each other constantly, and we were known as the band who would play anywhere for anybody, and you could go to our show and you wouldn't get hurt.
Nice.
We're very proud of that reputation.
Sure.
And the ticket prices were reasonable. They had to be. That our audience was poor.
Mm-hmm.
So these younger musicians could come and see me. In fact, Carl Wright, who's the drummer with Monty Alexander now, and a very, very good friend, has this wonderful story about hearing me play in Montego Bay with We the People and jumping the fence to see who was doing that. He was on a break from his hotel gig down the block, and he heard the guitar, and he knew there was nobody in Jamaica who played like that, and he wanted to see who it was.
Wow.
So
you definitely were influential and made a mark. Absolutely.
I think so.
Sure. Had to be.
The other thing that happened career-wise was after we did this tour with Dennis, which was really so many amazing and horrible things happened on that tour. It would make be like a great movie. I've been on a lot of tours since, and that was probably one of the most eventful. It wasn't the worst, but it was definitely eventful. There were all kinds of exciting things that happened every day.
Wow.
And it was the first time We the People had toured America, and we were not used to record companies. We were not used to American booking agents or clubs. I mean, I was a little bit, but I'd just been on the bar scene. I hadn't really handled the kind of stuff that we were being expected to handle.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up being sort of an intermediary between the record company people and the band because I could speak both languages.
Oh, nice.
And it happens occasionally to this day, less so now, but back in the day it happened a lot. And anyway, after the tour, we did Reggae Sunsplash, which is this wonderful annual festival in Jamaica. It was kind of like the Woodstock of reggae, except it was annual.
Okay.
And We the People always played at least one night of the festival, which was 4 or 5 nights in a row. And often we played 2 nights because we had to back so many artists. So we came off the road with Dennis. We went straight into rehearsals for 2 days. And we went to Montego Bay and played in Jarrett Park, which was a park that holds about 30,000 people. I think it's like a football stadium. And Bob Marley had just passed that year, and of course Dennis was supposed to be the crown prince, so they had Dennis on the show. Then they had the Wailers doing a tribute to Bob without Bob, obviously, and Stevie Wonder came down to sing with them. And Third World was on the show. I mean, it was just this amazing assemblage of, of the biggest and most important musicians in the idiom. And there was a lot of emotion attached to it because it was the first Sunsplash since Bob had died. So anyway, we went out there and we always played an opening set when we played these big shows. We'd come out and do maybe half an hour, 4 or 5 songs, depending on how big a show it was, and feature different people in the band. And Lloyd had this song called Trenchtown Girl, which is basically kind of like a reggae blues. And somehow it evolved that I would get a solo on this song. I probably stepped up and took one when he wasn't looking. And he didn't shut me up. I don't know. Anyway.
That sounds pretty good, man.
Lloyd was a great leader in that he gave us a lot of freedom to experiment, but he had a real sense of when the average person would find it daunting to follow, and he'd say, no, that's too much, pull it back. It was good up to there.
Okay.
We had Bubbler and Dean Fraser, the sax player, who's like the King Curtis of Jamaica. He's just legendary, even to this day. He was the sax player. And Dean and Bubbler were both great musical minds as well as superb players. And they were always coming up with intros and segues and medleys and things like that. And Lloyd would let them, even though it was his band. And if it got too complicated, he'd say, no, make it simpler. We had it better 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, I mean, you can have too much of a good thing.
Well, you can. And Lloyd was great at keeping it
nice.
The place where an average person could follow it. He liked innovation, but he wanted people to understand it. And it was a fractious band for a lot of reasons, and that was one of them. But really, he did a wonderful job in steering all these very, very brilliant characters in the same direction for a long time. It finally exploded in 85. But anyway, we're still in 81 here. So anyway, we're doing this tune called Trenchtown Girl, on which he took a bass solo, which was unusual in reggae, so he's kind of known for this bass solo. And then he did a couple of choruses, and I came in with a solo, and I was so excited I could barely breathe, just the whole adventure of everything I'd been through in this big festival and this big crowd, and being on the same bill with Culture and all these people and Third World and all these people I idolized. So I cranked everything up to stun and went off for 3 choruses and climaxed by detuning my low E string, the old Roy Buchanan thing.
There you go.
And nobody in Jamaica had ever seen that. So people went berserk. And that was awesome. Kind of like if one gig made my reputation there, that was probably that one, because no one had seen that. And actually, I saw a cat from Third World about a month ago. We were playing on a show together, and we were talking, and he said, when I saw you play that show with Lloyd on Reggae Sunsplash in 81, I said to myself, who is this guy? Where did he come from?
Nice.
So, so that was kind of like a big coming out party. And then we got back to Kingston, and the session work thing just exploded because people had seen me at Sunsplash, or people had seen me with the band. And the band was very popular for sessions anyway. And people would call Lloyd, and he would always, to get musicians for a session, he would always call us first. He was very loyal that way. But I was very much into hustling things on my own. I'd go around to the studios every day with a guitar and see if anybody needed anybody. It was like sort of foraging. But, nobody had phones, so if they wanted you for a session, they would leave a message for you at a place where you were known to frequent. And you would go around to all the places you were known to frequent during the day or in a 2-day period, and you'd pick up your messages. It was amazing how it worked, but it worked brilliantly. I don't think I ever missed a session because somebody couldn't find me.
That's really
even though
crazy.
we didn't have phones.
It seems like you were so busy, and like you were saying before, you were, sometimes cutting 15 songs a day and stuff. And for somebody to want you on a session and then to have to leave a message somewhere that you might not get for a day or two, it's like, how do you schedule sessions like that when you don't know your personnel is going to be there? It's like, oh yeah, we wanted you to do, but that was 30 songs ago. That was 2 days.
Yeah, there was some of that.
Right. It's like you missed 30 songs, dude.
We made 6 albums in the past 2 days, and we couldn't
that used
have
to
the
happen.
Yeah.
And we toured a fair amount. We didn't do long tours except for Dennis, but what we would do very regularly was shows for the indigenous Jamaican population in, say, New York or Miami or Houston or other places in Florida or D.C., any place where there's a large enough Jamaican contingent for a promoter to think there might make sense to have a reggae show. And these shows were not publicized in what you'd call the mainstream media. You'd only find out about them if you listened to Jamaican radio or were exposed to Jamaican media. Remember, this is pre-cable TV pretty much. And,
right. There's radio and print.
It was sort of the reggae equivalent of the Chitlin circuit. I call it the curry goat circuit because they had food at these places. One of the things you could always get would be curried goat.
Right.
Do We the People was very big on the curry goat circuit.
Do you still play with any of these guys? Do you still play with any of these guys? Do you still do
all the time?
Really? Okay, let's find out where you might be able to be seen nowadays.
Okay, the best place to find out is my website, andybassford.com, and the way that works is that Google has this wonderful calendar that you can link to, and I use Google Calendar to keep track of my entire life. And you can have multiple calendars. So as soon as a gig is confirmed or canceled, which does happen, I enter it onto my calendar and then copy it to the website. And it really updates within 2 or 3 seconds. I've timed it. And now that I have a magic phone, I can do this from anywhere in the world. So that's the best place to find out what I'm doing. And summer is the busiest time, so there are fewer things going on than there were, say, 2 months ago when I was, running all over the map.
Right.
But these things often come up at the last minute compared to, say, rock shows. And the reasons for that are complicated. First of all, the main guy I do this with is a fellow named Derek Barnett, who played in a band called Sagittarius. And Derek and I have known each other since my 3rd session in Jamaica. Wow. I saw this tall guy in the corner with a Fender bass who looked like he really knew what he was doing, and he didn't say much, but he was eyeing me keenly. And then Sagittarius became We the People's biggest rival. And we were friendly rivals. Everybody in the band bands would see each other in the studios, and Derek is a great bass player and a great singer and a great band leader, as is Lloyd. And the two of them had a lot of mutual respect for each other. They were a little younger and tended to back more of the dance hall artists, the DJs. We tended to back more of the singers. Okay. And they ended up being Yellow Man's band when Yellow Man broke. And that was when a lot of people first heard about them. And then when the dance hall era came in, and after I left Jamaica, they were really the #1 band for that stuff. And Derek and I have been friends since 1980. And in 89 and 90, when they had guitar player troubles, I did several tours with them with Yellow Man. And then Derek emigrated to America in the 90s, and about 10 years later, he and I hooked up again, and we've been playing together ever since. So that's generally who I play with when I do I guess the ethnic shows is the best way to describe it.
Okay.
Shows aimed at the Jamaican market. The other thing I do now that's quite visible is the Monty Alexander Harlem Kingston Express thing. And Monty is a wonderful mainstream piano player. He's a Jamaican who emigrated here when he was 18 or 19 and made a real name for himself in the traditional jazz world. But he also was one of the earliest session keyboard players in Jamaica. He used to work at Studio One, which was the Motown of reggae. He was the first house keyboard player there when he was still in high school. and he's very grounded in the traditional Jamaican music of mento and so on. And Harlem Kingston Express is a fusion, and it really is a fusion. There's 2 full rhythm sections on stage.
Oh,
on
wow.
one side of the stage is a jazz drum set and an upright bass. And on the other side of the set of the stage is a reggae drum set, the big kick, extra toms, all kinds of things, generally played by Carl Wright. And there's a reggae bass, with a big amp and a lot of low end, and me. And then Monty's there with his acoustic piano in the middle. And the music shifts back and forth between the 2 rhythm sections, and sometimes we all play together, and Monty cues it all on the spot.
Wow, that's really
interesting.
Real
interesting. It's super satisfying.
Yeah. I know those guys. They're called the Allman Brothers.
Not really.
I'm just kidding.
Wow.
And I really love both of these situations. I'm a big jazz fan, and Monty, working with Monty, has gotten me into that world, and we're on, basically his market is the jazz world, so we go to Europe a lot now.
Wow.
And
there you go.
We do the jazz clubs in New York, and we're going to Chicago next month. I'm not sure the club yet, but we're going to Miami in early November. So I do that with him, and then I do the ethnic thing with Derek, which involves backing up visiting Jamaican artists who don't have a band, just the same thing as I was doing with We the People back in the day. And Derek also does his own gigs. He's a wonderful singer himself, and he knows every song in the world, and his gigs consist of these 2 marathon medleys. One set is say an hour and a half straight songs flying one into the other from all over the Jamaican songbook, and then the second set is more of the same. But he's a very flexible musician. He's a superb jazz player. He's a great R&B player. He can sing a full night and keep your attention. He's a great showman. And we do various gigs for, in the Jamaican community. We play Jamaican clubs. We play sometimes large-scale parties, the occasional social club event, different things. But it's all on the website. So those are the 2 main things I'm doing at the moment.
That's really awesome, and he should be very happy that he has you as his guitar player, because if he's all over the map, he's the guitar playing is being done by the person that probably played most of that stuff.
Yeah, man.
Well, not all of it, but certainly I've. If I didn't play on the original, I've played behind the artist at some point.
See, exactly.
There you go.
What better guitarist could you have?
And and we both came up with a similar Jamaican road band and session experience during the same period. So apart from being good friends personally, we have this tremendous musical heritage that we draw on. The other people in the band are younger, and they come out of the same tradition, but they don't have they haven't been doing it as long. So it's a good combination of experience and energy.
Now, I'm just curious. I know we have to cut this soon, but I'm just curious. Do you use the same rig for both gigs, and what might the current type of rig be for Andy Bassford? I mean, what's your go-to for any or both of these?
Oh, okay, great. With Monty, it's very simple. I got right before I left Jamaica, I bought a 66, I think a 66 Telecaster that had belonged to Jeffrey Chung. I mentioned the Chung brothers before. And this guitar was actually used in a lot of the classic 70s sessions by Jeffrey. And before that, it was owned by a Canadian guitar player named, what was his name? Harrison. And he bought it purportedly from Robbie Robertson.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this guitar has Danny Harrison. That was the name of the Canadian guitarist. He was one of the first good rock guitar players in Canada. And he lived in Jamaica for a year or so and taught at the School of Music, and he sold the guitar to get back to Canada. Jeffrey's band ended up with it. Jeffrey used it on a ton of records. And then when the band broke up, this other fellow named Conroy Cooper got it, and then I bought it from Conroy. And that's the first gig I did with Monty. I pulled it out of the case, and he said, what a soulful old guitar. He just fell in love with the way it looked. It's very worn. It's got all that wonderful maple neck telly neck, black neck stuff on it. And it sounds great. And with him, I always use a twin because the twins now that you get, we're almost always using rented backline. So I find if you ask for the twin reissue, you're getting something very, very consistent that is new enough not to have
right, not to have a problem. Yeah, exactly.
And
cool.
And the promoters in Europe are pretty ethical about getting good stuff. When I was with Toots and the Maytals, they would skate on the rider a lot of the time, and one night I ended up playing through a crate bass amp. Another night I ended up playing through that amp that Joe Pass used to use, the Polytone.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely no high end. I had to preamp it with my Marshall practice amp to get anything out of it. It was
Polytone amplifiers.
For reggae, perfect.
When I was in high school, our music program, they had bought these Mini Brute Polytone amps.
I mean, they're a jazz go-to mainstay.
Absolutely, right? This thing was a 112 in a cube that was 12 by 12.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds like what I saw.
And I remember I was like, it was so loud.
And clean, crystal
you could
clean.
Not get that thing. And so then they came out with the Mini Brute 2. And I'm sorry we're going off on this tangent, but I just remember these things. They came out with the Mini Brute 2, and it had an orange knob on top of the volume knob.
Yeah, a tandem.
That was distortion.
Yeah, gain. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then they made a bass amp. And we had that bass amp. It had a 15 and like a 5 and a tweeter.
There you go.
And it would throw. It was very surprised.
They were probably one of the first companies, if not the first company, that made a little compact, very loud, very clean amp. That the jazz guys just latched onto. Because jazz guys they just want big and bold and clean, a little on the dark side. But
this was very much on the dark side.
Absolutely, but if
it had been any more on the dark side, it would have been in Mordor.
But I remember it was years later. I was out of high school, and it was probably like 20 years later. I get in an elevator downtown in Baltimore.
Okay.
And these two guys come in. One guy's got an upright bass in a case, and the other guy's got, he's got his big hollow body
jazz box,
and there's the Polytone.
They're still around.
I went, what in the world? I hadn't seen one in all those years.
They are still around.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's one gig's gear.
Oh yes, so the Monty thing is the telly, the twin,
right,
and a very small pedal board. What I do with pedal boards now is I take office supply trays,
okay,
which are actually quite sturdy. You go to Staples and buy them, and cable ties, and I have these wonderful new little miniature pedals that they're coming out with, and I have that TC delay, the tone print one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I just bought this amazing box from Japan. Apparently I have the first one in America that's, it's called a Rosemary something. I can't remember what it's called. I went to Main Drag Music the other day, and I said, I hate all distortions. What do you have? I really do. I have a drawer full of them, and I hate all of them. And I have to play at such low volume levels with most of these people that anything I'm doing distortion wise has to pretty much come from a pedal. So this thing is an emulation of a super lead. Hold on one second, I'll get it out of the closet.
Because we have to know the name of this thing.
Yes.
Especially if it's the first one in the country.
Well, now with all the attenuators, you could take out your 100-watt Marshall and make it whisper quiet.
It's true, but then you got to haul out a 100-watt Marshall, and it's like,
what's wrong with that?
Okay, here it is.
Nothing.
It is a Blackberry Jam handmade pedal, Rosemary.
The Blackberry Jam named Rosemary.
This thing, they had 3 of them in the store. They had a tweed one, they had a Stevie Ray Vaughan one, whatever that's supposed to be. And they had this one, which is like a super lead, and it's remarkable.
Wow!
I started playing through all of them. I could have bought all of them, but there are way too many Stevie Ray Vaughan people out there, so I didn't want to go that way. As much as I love him, there.
Totally.
I didn't really think it was going to be as useful for some of my other gigs as the super lead thing. So I started playing all the Blues Breakers stuff through the super lead. It's not quite a JTM 45, but it's close.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And the guy who was trying to sell me the pedal kept opening the amp room and going, "Sounds like you're having so much fun." I hate to keep interrupting you, but I said, "It's great. I love this thing." I ended up buying it. So that's on the board now. The TC. I have those Moore effects. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah. Yep. Heard of them.
They aren't all great, but there's a white one that does delay and a red one that does an amazing Phase 90 emulation.
Oh, nice.
And I have the green hot tone pedal for a different distortion. And then I have a blue thing. There's a wonderful store in Denver whose name escapes me, and we play Denver every year or so with Monty. They aren't far from the place where we stay, and they always have cool boutique effects. And this thing is called a rock box. It's large and blue and has a million switches, and I can't remember who makes it, but that's a very useful pedal also. And then I recently got one of these Dunlop mini wahs.
Yeah, those things are cool.
Yeah.
And that's a really good pedal. We were in Hawaii, and my regular pedal was making noise, and Monty is a fanatic about extraneous noise on stage. He really sends them. It's one of the few things that really bothers him. So the first night we're at the Blue Note, the pedal's getting scratched, and I went, I don't want to hear about this like a night from tonight. I'm going to hear about this if I don't get it fixed. So
Right.
I went to the music store. I tried the cleaner, and that didn't do all of it. So I said, okay, the pot is going. I'm not going to do a pot repair in the middle of Hawaii where I don't know anybody. So I found a music store. They had a very good music store there, and I explained the problem, and they said, we have these little wahs. And I said, let me try them, because, when you fly to Europe all the time, weight is really an issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And, you have to bring, and with Toots, I could get away with T-shirts and athletic wear all the time because he didn't care what we wear. But with Monty, it's more formal. Mm-hmm. And, I generally wear pants with, creases in them and stuff, and nice shoes.
I was going to say wearing pants is probably a good idea on stage. But,
generally, yeah. It's not like the Chili Peppers.
I was just going to say some people have been known to wear diapers or less, but
No, the Glenn Goins thing would not fly with Monty.
Well, here you go to help out. If you want the phase pickup or phase pedal, MXR just came out with the M290, the Phase 95 Mini. It's $100.
They've got one too?
It's $100. It's got 3 knobs, although one is big, right?
Okay.
The one knob is big, and then there's 2 small ones. In that sense of this, look how tiny this thing is. Literally, it's the 1/4-inch jack length.
Length.
Yeah,
it's like a 1-inch wide pedal.
Yeah, it's like the like those Moore pedals, right? Or
Moore, I think.
Yeah. It's just like those. It's orange.
Wow. And
it is now...
Everybody's doing it.
Everybody's doing it because of exactly what you said, the weight issue.
Oh, yeah.
And then what you got to do...
and it doesn't have to be international either. Fly dates. Everybody's doing fly dates.
Everybody does fly dates.
And they want the pedal board as small and as compact as possible. That's why I was going to ask you if that thing with all the switches on it and everything, was it worth the real estate? Okay.
Just barely. It's the biggest thing on the board, though, by far.
Yeah, it sounded like
it's very cool, but it's I think the super lead pedal is going to take its place soon.
Nice. That's for one. That's for the Monty gig.
That's for the Monty gig.
Does it change substantially?
Gig, a lot of the dance hall sounds have no. A lot of the dance hall records have no guitar and synth bass. So what I did for a while was I actually brought an A/B switcher, and I have the regular pedal board with Derek, which is one of the big pedal train ones.
Okay.
And that's got, let's see, an Ibanez phase shifter, a digital. No, I've got the Moore Echo unit on that one now. I've got what's that guy? Oh gosh, let me think. I've got the Digitech Auto Wah thing, which is great. That has some great synth sounds in it.
Oh, cool.
I've got the Mad Professor thing that's like the Pink Floyd sound in a box. The yellow one, I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
There was a big hype about them, and then nobody bought them.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to play one.
It's actually pretty cool. But what I have on that, I have that one for is, believe it or not, a lot of times I turn it down and use the delay only. I turn the distortion down and just use it for like a gain boost. Then I have, what else is on that? The octave, the Roland octave thing. Can't live without that for dance hall gigs. I've got 2 of them, the OC3 and the OC2.
Cool.
And that combined with the synth wah pedal, the Digitech thing, does wonderful synth bass sounds. So a lot of times Derek will play regular bass and I'll double him with a synth bass sound. For a while I was actually using a dual amp setup. And what that was like my Mesa Boogie, I have a 2A, and a Crate Power Block, another great amp that people have kind of slept on because the quality control wasn't good when they came out. But if you get a good one, they're really good.
Yeah, I have one.
And I have a TL cabinet that my friend Kim Goldich made back in the 70s for the bass thing, and the Boogie for the guitar thing. And I have a radial ABA switcher, so I can get either the guitar sound, the bass sound, or both.
That's pretty
And
cool.
when you double a bass line with the guitar sound and the synth bass and the real bass playing, it's just humongous.
That is pretty cool. And you know what? There's one thing we got to wrap, but there's one thing, Mick. Maybe we'll turn Andy onto that one pickup, the guest we've had that has the low register in the
the Little Thunder.
The Little Thunder, yeah.
I haven't heard about this.
It'd be Andy Alt.
Right, Andy Alt. Check out Andy. Google Andy Alt or Little Thunder.
Yeah.
Check out the pickup. It's kind of a unique thing. You might find that very useful and interesting as well. But
Andy Alt. Okay.
Yeah.
It's called the Little Thunder.
Yeah, another Andy. So, but Andy, we got to run on this one because there are a couple of things that we got to take care of. But thank you so much for coming back and getting a little further on with the story and letting us know what a performer like you is in uses in your rig nowadays. That was kind of interesting. So we'll it's constantly evolving as things come out that I think might be useful, as it should.
I'm always trying to get it to get closer to the sound I need at the volume that I'm allowed to play at.
Right.
And I should also mention that I was with Toots and the Maytals for 20-something years, and he was a bear about stage volume too.
Oh, wow. Well, you found out how to deal with it then, and nowadays it's even easier to deal with. So there's so many more flavors.
Now. It's one of the things that I'm good at doing. It sets me apart from a lot of the other people doing this stuff. Is I figured out how to get pretty decent sound, rock oriented sounds at volumes that an acoustic piano player is comfortable with.
Well, that in and of itself is a talent, and that's something that you can only learn by experience. So, very cool, man.
Every gig is another lesson.
Right.
I go back to the hotel room and go, "Oh crap, I have to try this tomorrow."
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, we're gonna keep an eye out. We're gonna put the website up again, and we'll keep an eye out. And if you're anywhere around, if we can, we'll come say hey. We'll
that would be great.
We'll see who you're playing with, and I'm sure either one will be an experience and a pleasure. So, Andy, thank you so much for coming on with us again and finishing the story, and much continued success to you, my friend.
Okay, thanks so much for having me on.
You're welcome. Take care. Have a great evening.
Bye.
And there you have the story, the end of the story. But it's an ongoing and ever evolving story, as everything should be. You know?
The way that the whole
But he's one of the guys in that industry, so it's just it's so cool to have a bit of an attachment to the reggae genre.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really cool, man.
I hope they get the internet there.
There you There you go.
So until next time, my friend.
Because we have to.
That's right. I'm Mick Marcelino.
And I'm Jeff Bober.
Yeah, and we're always saying
onward.
Be sure and follow the show on Twitter @AmpsandAxes Also, make sure you like the show on Facebook. For news, comments, and everything else, visit the webpage, ampsandaccesscast.com. Thanks for listening.